Islamic extremism as somehow something connected to Ukraine. It's absolutely unbelievable. There could be a war between Russia and China tomorrow, and Russia will still blame Ukraine and the West for it. Atrocious. It's actually disrespectful to the civilians killed in Moscow for the Russian terrorist regime to be claiming that Ukraine has caused this matter, this issue that has happened now. And make no mistake, the Russian terrorist regime will always blame Ukraine of every single wrong in their country. Although the vast majority of the wrongs in their country, such as the freezing of many Russian cities, such as the economic collapse, such as the degradation of public services, was caused by their own mismanagement, by their own actions, by their own genocidal demeanor in Ukraine. And now that the Russians have focused all of their attention on Ukraine, all of their military and FSB resources on the Ukrainian people, to destroy the Ukrainian people, to unroot the very identity of theirs. Now they act surprised when Islamic extremists come to their very capital and slaughter people by the hundreds. Now, my friends, it needs to be said that it's still unclear whether this was an act of pure incompetence by the Russian FSB, which is possible. It's very possible. Because as we know, the FSB is very good and very well trained at oppressing their own people, at putting their own dissidents down. But they're a little bit less good when tackling real threats, foreign threats, like extremism, like what we've seen right now. However, it needs to also be said that Russia has a history of doing provocations and inside jobs to make sure they have an excuse to attack the people who they want to attack. The war in Chechnya had something very similar happening right before Putin decided to go full throttle and level Grozny to the ground. A terrorist attack, that's right, that somehow slipped through the fingers of the Russian FSB, the self-declared all-powerful FSB that makes no mistakes, according to them. Now, my friends, we all know very well that the Russian terrorist regime is incompetent. But the Russian terrorist regime is not incompetent in everything. And it is possible that this situation was an inside job to make sure that they whip up the Russian people into a frenzy and point their fingers at Ukraine, although Ukraine was completely blameless in this situation. And as we know, my friends, there is a war going on between Ukraine and Russia right now. When the Ukrainians strike against the Russians, they strike their bases, their military positions. They strike at their depots, where they keep their shells, at the trucks that bring fuel to their tanks. They strike at the Russian logistics. They strike at the Russian oil refineries. They strike at the Russian gas stations. But they do not strike against civilians. And that is something that the Russian terrorist regime never shied away from. They always go specifically for civilian targets. They've always done so. It is part of their military doctrine to go for civilian targets. That is how the Russian terrorist regime works. Their military doctrine claims that if they sow enough fear and destruction and genocide among the people of their enemies, of the enemy states, usually the states that they attack and they try to oppress, then all the better. The more people they kill, the better. They feel like they will break the nations that they fight against. They feel that they will spread fear throughout the Ukrainian people and break them. But they are wrong. They have been proven wrong throughout this war. And the only thing this does is to show the whole world once again that Russia cannot be trusted. An analogy can be made between this current situation with the recent terrorist attack in Moscow and the real world. And the analogy is as follows. Russia is a prison. Its people are the inmates. And the FSB and the Russian military are the wardens. Now, some of the prisoners fully support the jail that they are in. They fully support them just for the crumbs they get from the wardens. They fully support them just to be slightly superior to the other inmates. Then some of those inmates, they oppose the prison, but they are incapable of changing much. After all, they are prisoners themselves. And that is why they usually die, or are put in even worse conditions than all the other prisoners of this Russian prison. But the majority of the inmates in this prison we call Russia are indifferent. They have been depoliticized. They have been separated from politics. When you ask them what they think about the current political situation in Russia, if they agree or not with Putin's measure, who is it that they support in reality? They answer the classic reply, I'm not a politician. It's classic, truly. And what an easy reply to give. It's easy to be a slave. It's easy to be incapable. To give up all of the power over your own existence. It's easy. But is it a good quality of life? Is it a good way for a better future? A freer future? A future of trade, prosperity, and international relations? A future of nuclear demilitarization and not nuclear genocide? Like the nuclear genocide that the Russian terrorist regime has been threatening every single time things do not go as they want. We can't say for sure what exactly happened in this recent terrorist attack in Moscow. We can't say for sure if it was an inside job or if it was a product of Russian incompetence and of this complete focus the Russian terrorist regime has in Ukraine right now. We can't say that yet. We don't have enough evidence. But my friends, these conspiracy theories spread by the Russian terrorist regime about how Ukraine was employing these Islamists, they're absolutely ridiculous. Makes no sense whatsoever. Ukraine has no links to ISIS and no links to Islamic extremism. Russia, on the other hand, they have the Ahmad group, which is an Islamic extremist group. And it's truly a sad story to see these Chechens enslaved by the Russian terrorist regime and sent forward to do their bidding. But we also need to mention that these Chechens of the Ahmad group have proven themselves to be nothing more but TikTok warriors who make some funny videos on TikTok, who shout Ahmad Sila in front of destroyed villages and claim that they have taken over them. When in reality, the casualties are mostly with the Russians who are sent there as cannon fodder, with the Ahmad troops pointing the machine guns at the back of the Russian soldiers. That is, my friends, because the Kadyrovites have been bought. Their pockets are full of rubles. And they don't care if they're selling out their whole country, their ethnicity, their culture, their religion. It doesn't matter to them. They are shills. They are slaves. But they are slaves with a better quality of life than the vast majority of the other slaves who live in Russia. Because the whole population has been enslaved. And the situation right now is as follows. This prison called Russia has had an attack against it from outside by Islamic extremists. And these Islamic extremists have killed some of the prisoners. Now we, the Ukrainians, and the free world We have nothing to do with this prison. We have nothing to do with the ones who attacked it. But because this prison hates us, because it's at war with us, they are compelled to blame us of their problems. They are compelled to blame us of the attacks that are happening against them. And my friends, obviously,